Today, we should support women who are legally second-class citizens in their own nations around the world.
Well, sure, but what does that have to do with the question before you? The question is not whether we should support equal rights for men and women. The question is whether or not feminism is good for the world, giving all the pros and cons. All you did here was say something that makes sense in order to make something else look like it makes sense. But that doesn't fool reasonable people. You might as well have said,
people shouldn't take undue advantage of each other, therefore communism is the best system of government.
The conclusion simply does not follow from the proposition. These two things, equal rights advocacy and feminism, are completely distinguishable. You can tell that from your definition. And outside of a book out here in the real world, the truth is that feminism does not advocate for equal rights. It advocates for much, much more. Nearly universally, we find feminism advocating for women to have the right to kill babies, no matter how far along they are in their pregnancies. And they just won't accept that women should be sexually responsible, but they want men to be sexually responsible. It's absolutely fucking crazy talk. We find feminism demonizing masculinity in general, demonizing men during a drunken sexual encounter, and always portraying the woman as the victim, as if the opposite could not occur. We find feminism demonizing men for having sexual preferences and expressing their sexuality in public. And on the opposite end, we see feminism glorifying women in their sexual preferences and expressing their sexuality in public. We find feminism raising about having to comply with conservative dress codes. And we find feminism doesn't want women to be held accountable for any crime they commit. Feminists even fight about women having to serve time for their crimes. And they fight for the right to serve in the military front lines, but then they do a 180 when it comes to the draft and say that men are the only ones that should be drafted. And all of a sudden, women aren't the equals of men. It's just fucking crazy. In short, feminism, unlike equal rights advocacy, seeks that women should have their cake and eat it too. That women should have every privilege that can be had without any accountability, and with the burdens of all of those privileges falling upon men and family and upon their society. But never ever do they advocate that an individual woman should have to bear the burden of her individual decisions and her individual actions. That's not equality, and the only people you are fooling, Shaw Fem Winterflake, are children and the delusional.
So they can experience the benefits of that first wave feminism brought primarily to white women standing more so than other women in the West.
Look, I know this was a debate, but you were supposed to give citations for every claim that you've made. You should know, if you're a scholar, that that claim that you just made has been challenged. As far as I'm aware, there is little or no evidence that suggests that, but for first wave feminism, women wouldn't have got the vote when they got the vote. So, Shafem Winterflake, put up the evidence that you were required to put up, or shut the fuck up.
Of course the world needed second wave feminism, which sought to reform the sexual and family rights of women.
You keep going back to this idea that of course your claims should be taken as a given. But they're not taken as a given. You haven't shown that these changes have been in the best interest of society. You're supposed to be a scholar, and you should know that many of the changes in sexual rights and in family rights, which of course implicate the often criticized divorce laws, alimony laws, child support laws, child custody laws, and even welfare laws, have been challenged. You haven't acknowledged these challenges. You haven't dealt with these challenges. You simply ignore those challenges. You claim to be a scholar, and here you had the perfect opportunity to cite the proofs of your claim, and you did jack shit. So what should we conclude about you? Well, I'll tell you what I concluded. I concluded that you have no integrity, that you are no intellectual at all, and you are merely a fucking shafim. At any rate there, derp university graduate, cite your proof or shut the fuck up.
Feminists in the U.S. were right to point out that the personal was political.
So what? If the personal is political for women, the same holds true for men. You have no point here.
While campaigning for, among other things, criminalizing marital rape in the 1970s to the 1990s, because no legislative body dominated by men until that point had raised awareness or had dealt with the issue of marital rape, and to raise awareness of and encourage the prosecution of domestic violence, notes 7 and 8.
Well, I don't really question whether or not that since the 1970s, some legislatures have changed the definition of rape to include marital rape. However, I do have a couple of questions. How come someone that is supposedly a scholar is claiming that absolutely no legislative body dominated by men until the 1970s had raised awareness and dealt with the issue of marital rape, and would try to back up that claim with an article from fucking Salon? That takes a special kind of moron. Since when is Salon a scholarly publication? Fuck! And not only that, Shawfem Winterflake, the article doesn't make the claim you say it makes. Rather, it states that second-wave feminists confronted the marital exemption in the 1962 Model Penal Code. And surprise, surprise, the Salon article doesn't give any citations as to where they got this information, so we could try to trace back who was bringing this up as an issue, whether second-wave feminists brought it up as an issue or other egalitarians. There was certainly no claim in this article that no legislative body had dealt with the issue whatsoever up and until this point. Is this what constitutes as evidence in your fucking pea brain? You had this opportunity to reach a wider audience than you normally do, and you select a Salon article to back up your claim that but for feminism, male-dominated legislatures had never criminalized marital rape. I mean, you don't even address whether or not forced sex between married couples may have been considered a separate crime, severely frowned upon, but not considered as heinous as being forced to have sex with a stranger. You just totally reveal yourself as an absolute dunderheaded zealot there, Shawfem Winterflake, and no kind of scholar. And you know what? I have to take issue about domestic violence not being taken seriously prior to the 1970s. When I was a kid, no one, absolutely no one, tolerated a woman being hit. I never, ever saw that to be the case. If someone found out that a man hit a woman, whether married or not, you could expect he would get a visit from an adult son, a brother, a cousin, or whatever, and he'd get the snot beat out of him. The thing you people from the 80s and onward have to understand, people from those times didn't run to the police unless they couldn't handle things on their own. We lived under different social norms. You could beat up a man for striking a woman, and seldom would anybody, not even the guy that got beat up, tell the police. Now, we can differ as to whether the 1976 model was better than the 2016 model as a way to handle these things, but fuck me, pretending like nobody protected women is utter fucking bullshit. And because you don't weigh the societal protections in place at that time with the societal protections in place at this time, we can't really judge how much weight to put on the scale here. Anyway, I wholeheartedly admit my experience was anecdotal. But if you want to dissuade me of what I witnessed, then you need to provide some evidence. Your narrative and your belief about the times I lived in is fucking overstated retardedness as far as I'm concerned. And you, with your warped and one-sided accounts of society you didn't live in, well, you're not showing the markings of a scholar. You're showing the markings of an ignorant, goofy, hyperbolic blabbermouth. Now, to be fair, your specific claim is about the legislatures not raising awareness or encouraging the prosecution of domestic violence. So fair enough. That's a point worth looking at. But you silly fuck, to make this point you cite what amounts to be a blog entry. It's got some claims in it, but no scholarly citations of studies, just basically an opinion piece cherry-picking some facts and allegations. But even so, nothing in this blog proves your claim, you silly fucking twit. This piece only suggests that the battered women's movement, which incidentally links to a PDF where an author attempts to outline the history of the movement, and that author cites anti-feminist Aaron Pizzey as a key player, for fuck's sake. So this brings up my earlier point. How much of this is due to feminist principles, and how much of this is due to egalitarian principles? But returning to the stupid blog entry that you cited, it's not proof of your claim. It's an opinion piece with uncited allegations galore. And the piece doesn't even make your claim. You are drawing an inference from it that may or may not be true. Only a fucking retard of a scholar or a disingenuous one would have cited this blog as proof.